The first time I saw her, I thought I was dreaming or dying. The sky was burning with an orange glow, and I was running through the trees like a trapped animal. My breath turned to ashes. The collapse had begun without warning. The mountain shuddered. The ground split into massive cracks, and an avalanche of rocks came toward me with the roar of a starving monster. I remember stumbling. I remember the air being knocked out of my lungs. I remember thinking, this is where it ends. But then, a gigantic shadow consumed the light. I felt the ground tremble again, but this time, it wasn't the mountain. It was her. A woman at least 40 feet tall, maybe more, descended through the dust cloud as if emerging from an ancient dream buried beneath the earth. Her silhouette stood out against the reddened sky, powerful and yet strangely delicate. Her dark hair fell like an immense river down her back, and her eyes glowed with a blue-silver radiance, like twin moons trapped inside the gaze of a being too beautiful to be real. Before we begin, I ask that you subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and tell us where in the world you're listening from. This helps us bring you more stories like this. Let's go. I didn't have time to react. A massive rock, the size of a small house, was coming straight at me. All I could do was raise my arm, instinctive, useless, almost childish gesture. But a giant hand, warm and firm, came down in front of me. The rock slammed into her palm and bounced off as if it had hit a living wall. She watched me from above. I felt her breath like a deep breeze that stirred the fallen leaves around us. "You're hurt," she said, her voice echoing softly between the mountains. It sounded human, but there was a depth to it that made my skin prickle. What are you?" I managed to stammer. She didn't answer. Instead, she lifted me with astonishing gentleness. As if I were a porcelain figure or something infinitely valuable she couldn't risk breaking. My whole body fit between her hands, which were covered by thin, dark leather gloves adorned with symbols I didn't recognize. The avalanche still roared around us, but she walked through the debris as if the chaos were nothing more than a light drizzle. Each step shook the forest, yet her movement had an impossible grace. I, unable to look away, felt a mix of fear, and a strange sense of peace, as if I had been meant to be there. When we reached a wide clearing where the collapse couldn't reach, she knelt and set me down with an almost maternal softness. My heart was pounding so hard I thought she could hear it even from that height. "You saved me," I said, still trembling. "I did," she replied. Her expression was unreadable blend of compassion and something deeper, something ancient. "And now I must ask for what is owed." I didn't understand at first. Her tone wasn't threatening. There was no anger or harshness, only a calm certainty that unsettled me even more than the avalanche. What do you have to ask?" I said. She lowered her face toward me, close enough for me to see tiny glowing specks on her skin, as if microscopic stars lived inside her. She was beautiful in a way that almost hurt to beauty that didn't fully belong to the human world. Her voice softened into a whisper that moved the air like a sigh of wind. "A child." The word hung between usavi and impossibles, if reality itself hesitated to allow it. I couldn't speak. She continued, "The life I saved has a price. That is how it is, and how it has always been among my kind. It is not about possession, nor dominance. It is about balance, about lineage." "But why me?" I asked, my throat tight. Her enormous, luminous eyes seemed to soften for a moment. "Because your destiny and mine became entwined today. And because you are the only one who can continue my bloodline before my species disappears, forever?" The wind whispered through the trees, as if even nature were listening to her declaration. I didn't know what to say. My mind was a storm of confusion, fear, and disbelief. But as I looked at her framed by the sunset, with that mixture of strength and sorrow in her eyes, I felt there was something far greater behind her words. Something I didn't yet understand, but that was already pulling me toward a fate I wouldn't be able to escape. "My name is Lethera," she said at last. "And you, human, have much to hear before you choose your answer." I could feel that my life, as I had known it, had just changed forever. Lithera watched me from above, motionless, like a colossal statue that had come to life solely to speak words meant to change the course of the world. I was still kneeling in the clearing, my hands trembling, my mind desperately searching for some kind of logical explanation, but there was no logic for what I was witnessing, only the overwhelming proof that she was real, painfully real. "Stand," she said softly. I stood up almost on instinct. Her eyes followed each of my movements, not with distrust, but with something closer to protective vigilance. When she rose to her full height, her figure towered over the trees, casting a shadow that felt like a small eclipse over me. Her clothing, a fitted dark tunic with silver reflections, moved around her legs as if it had a life of its own. It looked like it was made for someone who needed freedom of movement, not ornamentation, and yet her presence carried a supernatural elegance. "I need you to hear my story before you decide," she said, taking a step back to give me space. "What I asked of you is not a demand, it's a bond. One that could save something standing at the edge of extinction." "If you really need something like that," I said, still incredulous, "why didn't you look for someone else? Why me?" She tilted her head as if the question pained her a little. "Because it's not just about finding someone, it's about finding someone whose spirit resonates with ours. And you were where destiny chose to cross our paths." Lithera stretched a hand toward the horizon. Her fingers were as long as thick branches, yet they moved with impossible grace, as if the air itself bowed to them. "My sisters," she said, "there was a time when we were many, an ancient bloodline that ruled the valleys, walked beside the mountains, and fed the forests with our strength. We were not goddesses, though many called us that. We were guardians." I noticed a tremor in her voice, subtle, almost imperceptible, but painfully human. "What happened to them?" I asked. Lithera lowered her gaze. A lock of her dark hair fell forward like a silent waterfall. "Humans grew and changed. They no longer needed us. Some began to fear us. Others desired us." Her eyes darkened with a storm-like sheen. "In our wisdom, we chose to retreat. But in our retreat, we became vulnerable, and those who coveted our power found us." She drew a breath, and the ground trembled lightly beneath my feet. "Now, only I remain, the last of the High Guardians." The thought pierced me with unexpected weight. She wasn't just a giant woman, she was a remnant of a world time was trying to erase. "And you need an heir," I said quietly. "Not just any heir." Her gaze softened as if a warm breeze crossed her eyes. "A bridge. Someone who can carry the best of both worlds. Someone who can inherit my strength and your humanity." I fell silent. It was too much. Too much for a single afternoon, too much for a single human heart. "Understand that I am not forcing you," she continued. "Tradition says that one saved by a guardian is given the choice to bind their fate to ours. But the choice is yours." I felt a surprising spark of relief, followed by an even greater fear. If I could choose, then my answer could alter not only my life, but the life of a being who had carried centuries of loneliness. "Thera, why didn't you seek another path? Another way to preserve your lineage?" She smiled. And the smile, though immense, held a sadness so deep it hit me in the chest. "Because no more are born like me. Because the magic that gave us life is fading. Because the mountains no longer sing as they once did, and the forests no longer whisper our names. And because I have been alone for far too long." Her last words made me feel something I didn't expect. Empathy. An empathy so intense it almost hurt. She took a step toward me, slow measured. Her shadow enveloped me again. A hand descended, not to pick me up this time, but in a gesture of closeness. I dared to place my human hand on one of her massive fingers. Her skin was warm, surprisingly soft, and for a moment, the fear faded. "I will take you to my refuge," she said at last. "I need to show you something. After that, you may decide." The mountain crackled in the distance as if listening to our words. Lithara lifted me with both hands, But this time she did it with a care I hadn't even felt when she saved me from the avalanche. As if, after our conversation, I had become something more fragile, more important, or perhaps more real to her. Her giant fingers, wrapped in soft leather gloves, formed a kind of platform where I could keep my balance without feeling imprisoned. "Hold on," she said, her low voice wrapping around me like warm wind. And then she began to walk. Each of her steps made the earth vibrate not violently, but with the steady cadence of an ancient drum, as if her stride marked the heartbeat of a forgotten world. From my elevated position, I could see the forest stretching beneath us like a dark green tapestry breathing to the rhythm of the wind. The sunset light filtered through the branches and reflected off the silvery fabric of her tunic, creating flashes that momentarily blinded me. Despite her size, Lithara moved with the agility of a dancer. Every tilt of her body felt calculated. Every movement flowed with a harmony that contradicted her colossal strength. It was like watching a mountain walk, but a mountain that had learned how to dance. "Where are we going?" I asked, trying not to look down more than necessary. "To a place where you'll understand why I chose you," she replied without slowing her pace. The walk felt like hours, though it was probably no more than half of one. As we advanced, the air changed. It grew colder, cleaner, filled with a mineral scent that reminded me of the caves I explored as a child. Lithara began to ascend a rocky slope, and her deep, rhythmic breathing echoed against the natural walls. Finally, we arrived. The refuge wasn't an ordinary cave. It was a massive fissure in the mountain, large enough for her to enter without needing to crouch much. From within came a bluish glowsoft, like moonlight multiplied 1,000 times. When Lithara crossed the threshold, the light reflected across her skin and hair, turning her into a nearly celestial figure. "Welcome to the heart of my lineage," she said, as she gently placed me on a platform of polished stone. I lost my breath. Before me stretched a vast chamber carved by ancient forces that seemed more related to magic than geology. The walls were covered with glowing crystal veins that pulsed like life-filled arteries. At the center of the chamber was a deep blue pool, so still it looked like a perfect mirror. And above it, suspended in the air, floated small spheres of light, hundreds of them. "What are those?" I whispered. Lithara knelt behind me, which made her seem less imposing, though no less majestic. Her face lowered near mine, illuminated spectrally by the blue light. "Memories," she said. "Fragments of the lives of my sisters, of our past generations. Each sphere contains a moment, a battle, a birth, a ritual, a farewell. Everything we have been. It was beautiful and terrible at once. A cemetery of light, an archive of souls." "Can you see them?" I asked. "I can feel them more than see them, but you can see them fully." I froze. "Me? Why?" She looked at me with a gentle intensity, as if measuring the precise shape of my spirit. "Because you are not an ordinary human. I didn't know it when I first saw you, but I sensed it the moment I touched your skin. There is an echo inside you, a resonance that matches ours. It is rare, very rare." The words hung in the chamber like dust suspended in light. "Are you saying that I'm not completely human?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Not in the way you understand. You don't have the blood of my kind, but you possess something that very few humans still carry. Sensitivity to the lumen, the primordial energy that gave life to my species. It was an absurd revelation, impossible, and yet the spheres seemed to vibrate when I breathed, as if they detected my presence." "Come closer," Lithara said. "I want you to see something." I approached the pool, and when I looked at my reflection, I saw it distorted by the glow emanating from the spheres. My shadow seemed to stretch, mixing with waves of light. One of the spheres descended slowly, drawn toward me. Its brightness intensified until it surrounded me completely. Suddenly, a surge of images burst inside my mind. It was like seeing through the eyes of a giant woman running through a burning forest. I saw a face that wasn't Lithara's. I saw enormous hands protecting a child. I saw a betrayal, a final battle. It was a last memory, a desperate goodbye. I collapsed to my knees, gasping. I felt Lithara's massive hand behind me, resting gently on my back. "Now you understand," she murmured. "I didn't ask you for a child on a whim. I asked because the Lumen chose you before I did." I swallowed hard, unable to speak. "But there is still something you must see," she added. "Something that will change your decision forever." The chamber seemed to hold its breath, and so did I. Lithara lifted me with a delicacy that almost made me shiver. There was a tremor in her giant hands, something that hadn't been there before. As if whatever she was about to show me weighed more on her spirit than any boulder she had stopped to save my life. "Prepare yourself," she said softly. The blue light in the chamber seemed to intensify with every second, as if it, too, awaited the revelation. Lithara moved toward a secondary opening in the rock, narrower than the main entrance, though still large enough for her to lean down and pass through. I could feel the faint vibration of her steps, that deep rhythm that had become strangely familiar, as if the world itself breathed through her movements. As we crossed the threshold, a rush of cold air enveloped us. It was a smaller space, but just as imposing. A hidden sanctuary. The walls were covered in darker, almost black crystals that absorbed the light, instead of reflecting it. At the center stood a circular structure, like an ancient altar carved with symbols that glowed with a dim, fading radiance. And resting atop that altar was something that froze my blood. A gigantic body, perfectly preserved. A woman of Lithara's, same kind, but with skin pale as extinguished moonlight, eyes closed and hands crossed over her chest. Her tunic was torn in places and stained with a golden dust that looked centuries old. My knees almost gave out. Who is she?" I asked, though I already knew the answer would be devastating. Lithara lowered her gaze. Her voice cracked just slightly enough for me to understand that this was a pain she had carried alone for far too long. "My sister, her name was Caritha." The silence that followed was almost unbearable. I had never known Caritha didn't know her story or her life, but seeing someone so immense, so magnificent, reduced to eternal stillness, struck a weight into my chest I couldn't ignore. "I've cared for her since her final breath," Lithara continued. "And in doing so, I preserved more than her body. I preserved the last spark of the lumen that lived within her." I looked around, trying to grasp what she meant. "You mean her energy is still here?" "Yes," she said, "but it's fading. Everything is fading. That is why you must understand what's truly at stake." She brought me close enough to see details I never imagined could exist on such a being. Tiny marks on Caritha's skin, like ancient scars. A strand of hair slightly lighter than the rest. The serene expression her face still held. "When I saved you, I knew I could no longer keep waiting," Lithara said. "I know my species will not survive without a new bloodline. But I also know I cannot ask you to accept such a burden without showing you the real weight of my duty." I swallowed, feeling my throat dry. "Lithara, what you're asking isn't something small. It's an entire life." "I know," she replied, and in her voice there was a humanity that surprised me even more than her size. "I don't wish to bind you, or force you, or turn you into something you're not. I simply want companionship, continuity. I don't want my existence to be the last note of a song that once filled the world." Her enormous eyes met mine. The mixture of loneliness, hope, and fear within them was so powerful, I almost had to look away. "And if I say no?" I asked in a whisper. She blinked slowly. "I will take you back to your world. I won't harm you, I won't ask anything more of you. You will forget me with time, though I will never forget you." The tremor in her voice revealed the truth behind the promise. It wasn't a condition, it was a sacrifice. She set me down again on the stone floor. I felt small, not because of her size, but because of the moral weight of her sincerity. "I want to show you one more thing," she said. She knelt gently and extended her hand toward the altar. The engraved symbols began to glow a little brighter when her fingers brushed them. The air grew charged with a faint, almost musical energy. And then, something happened. From Caritha's body, a tiny filament of golden light rose into the air, drifting upward like a speck of dust illuminated by sunlight. But it wasn't dust. It was a remnant, a spark of ancient life. The light floated toward me, and I could feel it. It was warm, it was sorrowful, it was infinite. It passed through me without pain, like a memory that had never been mine. Yet one eye suddenly understood. A flash of voices, laughter, and then an eternal silence. I collapsed to my knees. Lithera brought her face close to mine, closer than ever before. "Now you understand why I need a child," she whispered, her voice deep and trembling. "Not just for me, but for all of them." I felt tears fill my eyes, without fully knowing why. "Your decision will be yours," she added, "but you must make it knowing what it truly means." The entire chamber seemed to hold its breath, and so did I. For a long moment. I couldn't speak. I stayed there on my knees, with that golden thread of light still vibrating inside me like a soft echo, like a borrowed heartbeat from someone who no longer existed. The entire chamber seemed to fall into a reverent silence, as if the mountains themselves were leaning in to hear what I would say next. But I had no words, only a tumultuous mix of fear, wonder, sadness, and a new, unexpected feeling I didn't yet know how to name. Lithara didn't move. Her enormous figure remained bent, toward me, but without pressuring me, without urgency. She simply waited. And in her colossal eyes, there was a fragility so immense, it almost broke something inside me. It was like looking into the soul of someone who had seen entire eras fade away, and still managed to keep a spark of hope alive. I slowly stood up, my legs trembled. I didn't know whether it was because of the vision, the emotional weight, or the magnitude of what was being asked of me. I looked at Caritha's body on the altar still as a sleeping mountain, yet surrounded by shimmering remnants of light that seemed to cling to a purpose. Then I turned to Lithara, whose deep breaths stirred the air like a gentle tide. "Lithara," I whispered, "what you want is so much bigger than what I am." She closed her eyes for a moment. "I know, and yet you ask." "Only because destiny brought you here," she said. "Because I didn't seek to save just any human. I didn't know who you were, but I knew you were someone who could listen, someone who could feel." I stepped toward her. The blue sanctuary light reflected on her skin, making her seem almost translucent for a moment, like a being sculpted from solid sky. "If I accept," I said, "what will happen?" Her voice dropped into a deep whisper that resonated in my bones. "We will share a bond, not of dominance or possession, but of legacy. The life that comes from us will carry my strength and your heart. I will not pull you from your world or ask you to abandon your life. All I will ask for is honesty, respect, and a connection that honors both your humanity and my lineage." The sincerity in her voice was so pure, it hurt. "And you?" I asked. "What will you gain company?" she answered without hesitation. "A story that does not end with me, an echo that does not fade, and perhaps a reason not to fear the time I have left." That perhaps struck me like the final note of an invisible orchestra. I took a deep breath. Let the cold mineral air of the sanctuary fill my lungs. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. I wasn't just an accidental witness to her tragedy. I was a bridge, a point of convergence, and maybe that was why I survived the collapse. Not by chance, not by luck, but because there was something I needed to choose. I turned to Lithara. "I'll accept," I said. Her breath halted for an instant. A vast silence fell over the chamber. The crystalline walls shimmered with the brightness they hadn't shown before, as if they too rejoiced or mourned my decision. I would never know. Lithera didn't smile right away. She first closed her eyes, as if centuries of weight lifted off her all at once. Then, when she opened them, a soft glow shone inside them, a glow I had never seen in any human being. "Thank you," she said, her voice deep with emotion. "You can't imagine what this means." She extended her right hand, offering me her index finger as if it were a human hand. I placed mine on her warm skin. It was a simple gesture, yet I felt something vibrate in the air like invisible forces giving their silent blessing. A sphere of light descended from the ceiling of the sanctuary. It wasn't a memory. It wasn't a remnant. It was a new spark. A symbolic birth. The light hovered between us, then dissolved into hundreds of tiny shimmering motes like stardust. "This is our beginning," Lithara said. The world outside the sanctuary felt distant, small, but in that moment I knew my world hadn't shrunk, it had expanded beyond any human limit. "And now?" I asked. "Now," she said, lifting me gently and holding me against her chest, like someone protecting a fragile treasure. "There is a future to build, and we will not be alone." As we left the sanctuary, the blue light behind us softened as if the ancient memories were bidding us farewell. The mountain air was cold, but I didn't feel it. Lithara carried my world, and I carried hers, in the only way a human and a giantess could. With respect, with hope, and with a silent promise that something new was about to be born. When we emerged beneath the night sky, a shooting star crossed the heavens. She looked at it and said softly, "Destiny always finds its path." And for the first time since I met her, I felt that maybe I was finding mine as well. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. It helps us keep bringing more enchanting tales like this to brighten your day. And tell us in the comments which city in the world you're listening from. See you next time.